Okay, well, I guess I will start with some introductions here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Claire Burton Lang. I run national events for Westward Whiskey and assembled the kits that were sent out to you all. This is probably my third or fourth time doing this with Whiskey Mavens. We try to do it at least annually to give you all some special tastes of what we've been working on. And I am just very quickly going to run through what you should have in your kits just to make sure that everyone knows what they have. We are, uh, you should have 1 2-ounce small bottle of our Westward Original that has a blue label on it. And then 3 unlabeled bottles, one that has a blue sticker with an S on it, one that has a red sticker with a B on it, and one that has a yellow sticker with a W on it. Although sideways, that W might look like a 3. I didn't number them because I wasn't sure what order Jonathan wanted to taste them in. So he'll let you know what sticker to taste and when. We also included some giveaways like matches and a pin, and then a honey stick and mini bitters and a little tin of salt that are the fixins for True Northwest Old Fashioned, which Jonathan can also talk everyone through if you want to make an old fashioned after the tasting is over. And then an info card about the Westward Whiskey Club. The 3 releases that you're going to be tasting today are all Whiskey Club releases. So then, and yes, Julius, I see your question. We will put the order in the chat for sure. So once Jonathan reads those off, I'll just enter those with the color stickers so you all know. And I've been working with the brand since sort of before we were making whiskey in 750 mLs back in the aviation gin days, for those of you that are familiar with the history. And I've known Jonathan for a few years. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Jonathan Harris. He will tell you a little bit about his background with the distillery and then lead the tasting because he knows these products, in particular the club releases a lot better than I do. So I will hand it off to Jonathan, and then I will also drop some more information into the chat as we're going through. And yeah, if everyone can stay muted while throughout the event, but if you have any questions, you can either drop them in the chat or unmute, and we can pause and answer those questions, or we can save them for the end. So with that, I will hand it off to Jonathan.
Hello, everybody. I am Jonathan. People call me John Boy at the distillery. It's a little easier to remember. I handle Westward's education and collaborations, and I'm based out of Portland, so I'm here at the distillery. So I do a lot of training as far as all of our staff and tours and brand education and things of that sort. So a lot of that also is very much club based because that's become such a core element of our entire business. As Claire was saying, so I dropped a little bit of the order of what we're going to be tasting, but I'll run you through all of them. Please feel free to drink while I'm talking as well. I feel extra boring if no one has anything in their hands. And also, the power suggestion is very, very real. So I want to kind of introduce the background of these while you guys taste them, and then we can talk a little bit about notes. And then if you have some questions, we'll kind of address some of those at the end. But from what it sounds like, most of you are quite familiar with what Westward is. Westward started way back in 2004, which was basically when artisan distilling really wasn't a thing. It was us and a handful of other people in America. And our idea was like, what does a high-end whiskey of the Pacific Northwest? What is that like? And we went to single malt because the whole purpose that bourbon adapted from was when there was no barley, or at least enough of it on the East Coast to be making single malt. But once you get out here to the West Coast, not only is there's plentiful, beautiful grain, there's also this really wonderful brewing culture. So that's also a major kind of touchstone of what Westward is. Because we use a full-fledged brewer's yeast to be brewing before we distill down into a whiskey. Yeah, and that's kind of a piece that's majorly ignored on the front of whiskey education from most distilleries because they're very efficiency-based. But But yeah, without further ado, let's taste a little splash of our original. So that should be your 2-ounce bottle. From what it sounds like, you're going to be somewhat familiar with this, and it's always a really good place for us to jump off of, because for the most part, this is going to be kind of Westward's, base. It's what we're normally jumping off of. So because of our using brewer's yeast, we get all these high ester content. We get a lot of citrusy and a lot of floral tones that come through in our wash. Basically, the only thing that's keeping that wash from being a releasable beer is the fact that we're not hopping it. So our brewing method extends quite a bit. It's very purposely inefficient, but what we find is you get these tones that are normally missing in a lot of American whiskeys, these more stone fruit tones and these floral tones that come through. But also because of that, we get to be a lot more loose with our distillation, purposely so. We do what's called a low reflux distillation because we're not trying to over filter. Distillation, you guys probably know a decent amount of it, but it's deceptively simple. You're heating up a liquid till it turns into a vapor, and then you force that vapor back down into a liquid. Obviously, there's much more nuance, but what copper is doing in the process, it is adding, it's deionizing. We don't have to get into that, but it's also adding filtration because it's adding reflux. When those vapors rise, they grab on and fall back down and redistill. Because we never developed off tones that we didn't want to keep, we only developed these kind of estery, lovely tones in our wash. We wanted to preserve as much as possible, but it also makes our whiskey a little bit more oily texture, very rich. The way I like to pitch that as well is it's a very approachable high-end whiskey because we are still using New American White Oak. So to kind of break it down very simply, we're distilling we're brewing like a nice high-end beer. We're distilling essentially as if it is a single malt, but then aging like it's a bourbon. Doing that hybrid process kind of makes Westward a really good place for almost all types of whiskey enthusiasts to hang out, as well as new approachers to whiskey themselves, because it is a single malt. But when a lot of people think of single malt, they think of intense peatiness that comes from Scotch. Not only is that a small piece of Scotch, but we aren't peating, so you just get that kind of nuttiness, well-roundedness that comes from doing a single malt. But you also get that vanilla, caramel tone, the freshness of aging something in a new barrel. And then I'll talk a little bit about age during some of these, mainly because they're such small, sometimes single barrel projects. But for the most part, Westward doesn't do any age statements. We're doing everything by taste. Because you aren't climate controlling barrels when you're aging them, it's another piece of the adaptation that whiskey endures when it moves from region to region. So it ranges even down to what part of the tree a barrel is being made out of. So we're tasting them all past 2 years. And then when we strike that balance, that's when we're going to be pulling. And it's usually ending up between 6 years, around so. But we don't age statement anything. Instead, we go for a little bit more of that consistency when we are marrying our barrels of about batches of 45. All right, enough of the whiskey that you know a decent amount. Let's get into some kind of like weirder, nerdier stuff. So I dropped the order in the chat, but I'll kind of reiterate. We're going to be starting with the red B. What the B is standing for in this case is Bridgeport. Bridgeport is a very legendary brewery of Portland. They are responsible for helping popularize the IPA. It is also one of the first places that Miles Monroe, our master blender, called home. We initially did a really special project with them that this is kind of stemmed off of. The special project came from us distilling one of their beers down into a whiskey. The reason I wanted to start with this is We make everything on site in the same place, which basically means we get to see this linear journey throughout, basically grain to glass in the same spot. What that means is there's kind of 4 things in that journey. There's the malted side. So in malting, we are sourcing it from Great Western, which is a wonderful malting partner here over in the Pacific Northwest. But the 4 kind of aspects is there's malting, there's brewing, distillation, and maturation. 3 of those things we can completely alter or tinker in little ways and express new things. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we established our club, is because we find that so many people who are big fans of Westward also are very, very excited about innovation and very excited about the education of whiskey. So doing our club allowed us to not only tinker around and release whiskeys that no one's ever heard of or high-end small batch, but also lets us collaborate in a different way so that we can be hands-on with a project, which we then release. This was one of them. So sadly, Bridgeport is no longer with us. Rest in peace, Bridgeport. So it became this really wonderful memorial bottle. But the reason I'm starting with this one is this is not a single malt. Westward adapts to where it's being made, even the grains. So what this actually is, this is a decently high rye. It's a 32% rye. Because we are cloning that Kingpin Red Ale that they made, we are using the exact mock-up that is. And so the build of that is 3 different types of ryes. There's a rye malt. There is a chocolate malted rye in there. What other rye? There's a 3rd one. Caraway malt. That's right. And we even use their English ale yeast as our yeast strain. Once we distilled that down and aged it, it was super wonderful. This was a release back in 2001. And this was after they had already folded. And we found that there was really interesting notes to it, like orange peel, as well as these kind of grassier, mintier notes. But it was still very bold. Well, we kind of left 1 barrel of that aside. So this is aged up even further. This was left for another 2 years. So this released very, very recently. This was a specialty 1 barrel release for our Founders Club. And we found that a lot of those kind of like orange tones turned into more lychee. You get kind of like almond roca off of it. So yeah, while Westward is a single malt whiskey, the club is where we get to experiment not only with, finishing is the way that most people like to think of, how a lot of distilleries change up their process, but you can fundamentally change it by altering which grains you're using, even down to which strain, as well as which yeast you're using. Which is a good segue into the next thing that I want you guys to try. The reason this one is next, so now we have talked about that first thing we changed. So we changed our grain. So we changed our malt. This one is we changed our yeast. This is usually where I get most excited about Westward, where we change it up, because this is what most distilleries ignore. Jumping into, different yeast strains, what that is offering through our esters as well.
Hey, Jonathan, sorry, before we hop into the next one, Ken just wants to pause quickly because some folks have some tasting notes that they wanted to share. So maybe we'll just pause for a minute, let folks share a little bit about the first one, the Bridgeport, and then we'll jump into that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Sounds good.
So am I the only one who smelled Reese's peanut butter cups on this?
Yeah, I didn't get that.
I'm getting more of honey and honeysuckle and a lot of floral notes from the first one.
Yeah, I wrote in the notes like wildflower and the winter spice and like wood, like forest notes. And then I get a chocolate mint, those mints at the Italian restaurants. I get that on the taste in the front.
Yeah, I get Andy's mints on the front of this thing.
Yeah.
I second that motion.
You almost get a little cinnamon too, which is kind of weird.
That's at the back end. Yeah.
Yeah, cinnamon
I mean,
towards the end. Just towards the finish, it's cinnamony.
That's what I'm getting. I'm like, man, and it's not. I like it. Actually.
What is the proof on this? It's such an easy sipper. It glides down like water. It's so good.
This is 90 proof.
Okay.
We do alter some for our specialty releases, but most of them are going to stay the same.
Are you guys like 43 to 45 ABV through your bottles? Is that where you stand? Like kind of.
Oh yeah, we're going to be sticking at about 45. The only thing that's ever gone below 45 is actually our annual milestone release, which just released.
Okay, I got the stout one cast. That's a 43, I think. Too.
Yeah, stout is 43 or
stout's 46.
46.
Oh, is it 46?
Yeah, stout's 46. So that's 92. Jonathan can probably explain.
Oh
why
yeah.
And the rest
right.
that you're going to taste today are going to be 45.
I like the stout. I got a bottle of that. That thing's awesome.
The stout tends to be the one that I drink the most of, which is some people are like, "Oh, it's your favorite." I can't pick. It's it changes from season to season, but the one that I've drank the most of is definitely our stout cast.
That's awesome.
Are you using your proprietary yeast or are you using some other yeast for this one?
For the Bridgeport?
Yeah.
It is an English ale yeast that they're using. Normally, we use what's called a Chico strain, which is kind of an industry standard pale ale yeast that is known for its citrusy and floral components. But when we were replicating this, we wanted to replicate it almost exactly. So we had them come brew on our system.
All right, so let's move on to the next one.
Are we ready for the next one? Lovely. Also, I love that. I'm definitely going to be stopping for each one of them because I like hearing from you guys. And you were dead on. There's, these sweeter kind of candy, nutty notes backed by kind of like wild, like grassy notes. And those are official kind of release notes that we put. So it's cool to kind of hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, Jonathan, before we proceed, what's the age on this one?
The age on the Bridgeport?
Yeah.
The original Bridgeport we released at a little over 4 years, and then this was an additional 2 years. So this is above 6 years. But yeah.
Yeah, it tastes like I was sure this is 5+ because this does have the feel of a matured whiskey.
It's definitely, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of hitting that sweet spot for us. Absolutely. We find that we kind of hover in that area of 6 years. All right, let's move on to the next one. We're going to do the blue S next. And in this case, the S is standing for sourdough. So as I began explaining a little bit, switching out that yeast strain can be one of the most experimental ways that Westward is altering our final product. And it's also what gives us a lot of assurance that us taking our time in this process is actually, altering and ultimately resulting in a better product. You're not using really horrible ingredients to cook a high-end meal. But we've experimented with yeast in ways that my favorite release was a Belgian Ardennes, where we used a Belgian Ardennes yeast and did a Trappist ale, as well as we did a Hefeweizen, Bavarian Hefeweizen yeast. But this one is something really interesting, and one of our most sought after releases we did was a sourdough whiskey, which is very ear catching and very weird when you hear it. But what we're really doing is we're using a sourdough yeast as our yeast for our brewing. So we actually collaborated with the James Beard Award-winning baker in Portland named Ken Forkish, and used his, I believe when he got it, it was already 100 years old, and then he kept it fostered for another 15, and used that as our yeast strain. And because we were forcing a bread yeast to do something it wasn't exactly bred to do. It did take a decent amount longer. It took multiple weeks, and because this was so experimental, our first release of it was very, very small. And then we realized we had something very special on our hands. So this is our second edition of it. So we recently started working with him again to make sure that this is a release that, as many people as clamoring were for it, we could release too. Let's drink it.
I put in the notes. All cookie dough. Sorry.
This has incredible nose.
Absolutely.
I'm picking up a very like maple, like almost like a breakfast maple waffle note on the front end for smelling. And then the back end, I can't put my finger on it. It's something super sweet.
Julius, you're right, but this is more of not the maple you get at the grocery stores, but when you're actually harvesting maple.
Yeah.
I also pick up fresh dough. I am not kidding on the nose.
Oh yeah, the dough. That's what I was saying. Like cookie dough,
It's
and
so
then
good. Oh, you were saying that? I didn't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Anthony, I get that dough in the back end, that waffle on the taste.
It does.
This is just a delicious whiskey. It really, really is.
This is what you call a breakfast whiskey.
It's going to be very dangerous.
For sure.
Whoops, I didn't mean to drink the whole bottle.
In fact, so one of my personal note for this one is it's like banana pancakes in a lot of ways. Yeah, you get that kind of like syrupy, nice sweetness, but that, like almost sourdough pancakes, you get that kind of breadiness to it, as well as that, the fruity banana tongue.
I could get that banana bread. That's my experience. What you're saying, I get the banana bread on there, toasted with butter on it.
Yeah, I can toast this all day.
For sure. Yeah, no more mimosas for lunch.
Right, brunch whiskey.
Yeah, brunch whiskey. That's what I was going for. Yeah,
that's what.
I love it. Yeah, so this one we released. This was our last club release before the cognac finish, which is coming out this week.
I got to join this club because I don't get this.
I want one of those.
This.
Yes.
It's very oily for 45. It's very oily.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Oh yeah, creamy. Yeah, smooth. No spice going down the throat, just sweetness.
We originally, our club, I think in 2022, we finally took the club national as much as states will let us. So definitely, if you are interested in the club and people can ship liquor to your state, then
I think Tennessee's one they're having issues with.
Tennessee, I think, is back on. It's
are they?
Yeah, I think it's the most tumultuous.
No, me and Anthony had the unfortunate place of Utah.
Yes.
We can't get shit here at all.
You're only a couple states away from the headquarters, though.
Right. We secretly call it olive oil, and then you send it through. That's how you do it.
How about North Carolina? Have you seen them open back up? It's been hit or miss as well.
North Carolina, I think, is open again. I'll have to double check the map. I know Tennessee is open.
Okay.
Which is very funny because I remember when it went off and then went back on, and then I was like, "Come on, guys."
Yeah, because I had shipments coming, and all of a sudden they stopped. And I was like, "What the heck?"
I could talk about liquor legislation all day, but let's talk more about drinking whiskey.
There you go.
Yep.
Get that P.O. box of Landover, shouldn't we?
So definitely, this last one that we're gonna be trying is the most exclusive thing on this tasting because this is something that's not even around, at least anymore. It's completely sold out, even in our Westward library, which is our Breakside wheat wine cask.
Did I hear you sold out?
We are sold out of it.
That's not fair.
On one hand, it is great to share with people because it's like, oh, you're getting this exclusive experience, and then it can be a little punishing if you do really love it.
The nose
but
on this thing's amazing.
Yes, I'm glad. Yeah, okay. So
Yeah, it's like 3 different noses on that. That's crazy. This one's like more floral, citrus.
this
Wow.
is kind of Westward history in a bottle as well. So this taps into that last thing that we can switch out, which is maturation. You see that with our main in our main lineup in the form of our Pinot Noir cask or even our stout cask. But this is a Breakside wheat wine cask that we used. This was a selection by our founders members. So we have a founders club. We have 2 tiers, and the founders club gets this the specialty event each year. And for 2022, we had them pick out what the next release was going to be, and this is the one they all voted in. And the reason why I say it's very much Westward history is because Breakside is a very, very well-renowned, very famous brewery here in Portland, and actually outside of Portland as well. And when we started, we knew kind of the bones of what we wanted Westward to be, but we did not have our own system for brewing yet. So we actually went and brewed with Breakside to be making our wash initially. And so this is kind of coming full circle as far as collaboration. So this is the oldest release we've ever released, single barrel wise. It is over 9 years old. So it first was aged about 4 years in New American White Oak, and then an additional 4 years in that wheat wine cask, and then 1 more year in a Westward cask that had already aged Westward in it. So it is fascinating. Because of that kind of oldness, you definitely get much more of that woody tone, but Westward still sings. You still get a lot of that fruit note to it as well.
I want to say great pairing, Jonathan, because both 2 before, this is like a combo of it. And it's like the herbal lavender, but then you get a chocolate on the nose kind of thing. It's like just crazy, like perfect pairing, dude. Awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was one of the, not only did I want to strike kind of a linear way in which we can substitute these different, experimental techniques out, but this is this is a big, bold thing to end on in a way that also kind of combines both of these processes in a fun way.
Yeah, even the taste. Yeah. I was on the one before that, just to let you know, like when I let it sit, it actually turned to coffee. So that one's definitely a breakfast brunch whiskey, and I want a bottle of that.
Mm-hmm.
This one I'm getting kind of like almost a honey water flavor on the back end. It gets really sweet right at the back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honey with a lot of citrus.
Yeah.
It's a lot sweeter than all the other ones.
Wait till you taste this thing. This
thing's like a honey lavender pepper bomb, and then everything else that the other 2 had. It was like a perfect, you love it, symphony that you just did.
It's sweet, but it has this citrusy. It's almost like a Mediterranean tangerine citrusy coming up, just at the back of the palate. I love this.
John, what's the cast in this? Was this American oak?
Yeah. All 3 barrels were American oak. That being said, there's significance coming from that wheat wine. Absolutely. You're getting that sweetness, you're getting that kind of nutty tone from it. But I think that the fruit tone is coming through just Westward given age. Our esters only break down and reassemble throughout that aging process. And so Westward already has so much of that fruity nose that it's just coming through so much.
It's almost a blood orange.
It's interesting that every single malt, American single malt, has their own kind of taste of where they are. With Westland, and then you got Copenhagen, and then you guys, it's all distinct different, and it's amazing. All you guys have amazing stuff. It's almost like Scotland, but America wise, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Areas has a different environment.
I mean, that's what's so beautiful about whiskey, is that basically from its origin, it's always been adaptive to where it's being made. Even just especially when you're talking to American whiskey drinkers, usually they think very binary about Scotch and bourbon. But even the idea of, the peated taste comes from an adaptation of having to utilize what you had on that land. And same with bourbon, we used corn because there wasn't enough barley. But when you come out here, it's like, this is, to me, the pinnacle of what a whiskey can be for the Pacific Northwest, because you are having that high-end brewing culture, that wonderful grain.
Oh, yeah.
As well as the aging conditions here are incredible. And not a lot of people think about it because you have things, that is cold and wet like Scotland, or hot and dry like the American South that kind of pulls into the pores of the wood the whole time. We have a really lovely ebb and flow where we're having hot, dry summers and cold, wet winters, creating that ebb and flow, being pulled into the barrel and pushed back in.
I can kind of pick up on that slightly because I'm visiting in the Northwest, drinking, outside in cooler climates, you can almost taste that Northwest flavor that I almost miss it. Like after you smell it, inhale, just the air itself, it's almost integrated with the whiskey for sure.
Twice and missed twice, so I'm on a hot streak.
I would say, like with Westward, you bring Oregon into your whiskey. It's just like Westland does the same. Like like I was saying with that environment, it's like beautiful symphony music that you guys do. It's awesome. Do you guys ever do, or I don't know if you're ever going to do it like Scotland will use barrels at all? Would you ever do that or no? Are there any specialties that you guys do that?
We never say never as far as, innovating and trying out different processes, especially when we're just talking about our club. Because that gives us the bandwidth to be a little bit more experimental. One of this, as long as this stays in here, one of the other barrels that our Founders Club was voting on for the release that the wheat wine ended up making was only in brandy barrels, and that was the only barrel it was in. It was only in used barrel.
That's awesome.
So we never say never as far as innovation is concerned. But when it comes to, the taste of American whiskey is still very much, that new American white oak. And that's not changing as far as our flagship is concerned.
So do you guys
Claire,
sorry. Go ahead.
Claire, for Todd, because Todd hopped in late, so can you just tell him the color codes and the...
Oh yeah, absolutely. The first thing we'll be trying is the 2-ounce bottle that you have, which is our original, just as a really lovely kind of like base for understanding the rest. And then the rest, so you'll be going red B, blue S, and then yellow W. It also kind of looks like a 3. And what those are our rye, which is our Bridgeport release that we distilled their Kingpin Red Ale into a whiskey. Our sourdough whiskey, which is our most recent club release, where we used a famous baker's sourdough starter as our yeast strain. And then the final one, which is our wheat wine cask finish, where we collaborated with Breakside to do our oldest single barrel, which is a 9-year-old wheat wine finish.
Fantastic. And what did you guys just taste right now?
The last one.
The last one? Okay, fair. All right.
No, we haven't tasted the signature yet. Don't worry.
So did you guys have any
Was Miles by any chance in perfumery before he became a distiller?
No, he was not. I'm sure he would love to hear that question.
Each one of today's expressions has, it is some of the finest. Jeff, what do you have to say?
I love these. My favorite was the last one, but I just came back to the first, and whoever said that was a coffee bomb, wow, you spot on.
That was me.
That one, it's all coffee. I loved it.
Yeah, at the end where you let it sit, it just like you're like, whoa, at breakfast whiskey all the way.
Exactly.
I want that bottle.
But I mean, I couldn't stop smelling that third one. Was just amazing. The wheat wine one.
Go ahead.
I didn't even want to drink it. I just wanted to just keep smelling it.
Ooh.
What was the red cap one again?
The red one, the red B is our Bridgeport release, which is the 32% rye English ale yeast.
Because this one would match up perfect with the smoked brisket. 100% all day.
Oh yeah.
Smoky back end.
Just to let you guys know, Anthony is, this guy, competition wise, he's like the best guy to cook a steak. Anthony's the awesome. I've competed with him. So
I'm only 22nd in the world, so we'll try.
Yeah.
Wow.
he's
but,
awesome.
but I've got a serious question here. Doesn't brisket go with everything?
Almost.
Not everything. Almost.
No. It doesn't pair very good with, honestly, I'd feel like gins. Not at all.
Well, I don't like gin, so
No,
it's fine.
gins would be like a fish, like a seafood kind of
it does
thing.
not go with gin at all. So,
It's interesting. Even some of the most lovely things pairing wise don't always go together in like a harmonious way. One of the hardest days of work I ever had was I was supposed to come in and eat a bunch of chocolate and drink all of our whiskeys and put together a chocolate pairing. And that sounds so fun. It even sounds like I'm making a joke right now. It was so intense because chocolates that don't pair well made drinking whiskey so much worse. It was so hot. And ultimately it ended up wonderful. But yeah, having things that you think, a good and a good always go together, just not always.
So,
Yeah,
Jonathan
honestly.
and Claire, I was just going to say, you guys sent me the barrel char stacks of boxes to me, and I made the greatest brisket rub, and I've sold it back here in Utah. It's awesome. Like, and I don't know I don't know what barrel you guys gave me, but you guys didn't want it because I guess something about the char, marketing wise, or something chemical wise. Anyways, if you guys ever want to rethink that, it's selling like hotcakes over here.
So you haven't gave me a bottle yet, so
We do.
Just message me, Anthony. I'll give it to you, man.
At this
Come to my
point,
steak
since
class.
we are doing mostly fresh filled barrels, some of the things we do with staves is we cut them up and we sell them as chips for people who want to be barbecuing or even smoking their cocktail.
Yeah, so I'll be buying some more. And Anthony, I'll be in Florida that day, man. So my kids' soccer. So sorry,
Oh,
but
man.
after that, I'll give it to you on some. Don't worry.
No, but going back to the pairing, obviously the sourdough, any desserts. So we're talking after Thanksgiving dinner, having your pie. This is definitely going to finish the day off right. And I think that's what I'm going to save this bottle for. The rest for Thanksgiving Day.
Well, do you guys want to make a cocktail? I don't think I have to be extremely hands-on as far as I assume most of you people know how to make an old-fashioned. But what's left of our 2-ounce bottle of the original is what we're going to be utilizing. And you should also have a honey stick as well as some bitters. This is what's known as what we call our true Northwest Old Fashioned, and is kind of Westward's signature cocktail that we utilize for most. Do we also have a salt tin in there, I believe, as well? So a little bit of sprinkled sea salt adds a perfect balance to that as well. So it should just be the entire contents of that stick of that whiskey, a few little dashes of the bitters as well. Be a little bit light on the salt at first. Just like bitters, you can always add more. You can always take more out. But you'll find that this is kind of a really good riff on a very classic old fashioned, while still kind of leaning into the aspects of Westward that make it really special. Some of those honey notes, a little bit of salinity, while also kind of working with partners here in the Pacific Northwest.
Now, I'm from Wisconsin. I've never heard of an old fashioned before. What?
Oh, Wisconsin.
Wait. I know you're lying because you use brandy to do it.
Some people use brandy to do it. I still use whiskey.
Some people use Sprite to do it in Wisconsin.
Pardon?
I said some people use Sprite to do it in Wisconsin.
Drink your
Only
drink
at the
how you
dive
like
bars.
it, but I think they're nuts.
Only at
You
the
drink
dive
your
bars.
whiskey as you like it.
Yes. Even being a whiskey educator, there is no right way to enjoy whiskey. I'll absolutely give anyone that. There can sometimes be a right way to appreciate something, which is to pick it apart, try to understand it. But there's never a right way to actually enjoy what you're drinking. I do remember a real life experience I had where someone came in and he had been in and bought like a case before, and he was buying another case, and he was like, "Man, I mixed this stuff with Mountain Dew, and it's amazing." And I was like, "Wow, I can grit my teeth a little bit." I was like, "You know what? Power to him. He knows what he likes." And because of our belief in like the yeast, which is utilizing one good thing should ultimately result in a good thing at the end, elevating what spirits you're using will ultimately make that little bit of impact.
Jonathan,
I
on
appreciate the dropper. That's a nice touch on the aromatics from your local company.
It's nice, right? Yeah. So I actually just had a co-class with Cindy who makes a lot of the bitters that we use, and using a dropper. So you get to even be a little bit more exact because about half a dropper is a dash.
Okay.
So you get to be a little bit more controlled.
this is awesome. By the way,
That honey is excellent.
cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Hey, Jonathan, on these bottles, when you guys do this, do you guys do a blend? Like, how many bottles do you like with the mash? You're like, okay, we're gonna barrel this many to try to get this taste, kind of thing. Is this like going into it? You're kind of thinking in your head, how many barrels do we need to do to blend this to get that certain taste? How's that process?
That is definitely for our main lineup. Absolutely. We actually just increased how many barrels we're mingling between for our flagship, because now we're sitting at about 40 to 45 barrels to strike that consistency. But Miles still does go for a better flavor over a consistent one, even though we do have a signature Westward tone. But that change you're really only going to see, years to years versus month to month. But yeah, at this point we're doing a 45 barrel batch, and since we already have notes we've been taking since trying them at 2 years on, we know how they fit into that equation of what Westward flavor profile is. Which is I have that equation. I'm not supposed to share it, but it becomes not plug and play because there's still very much artistry to it. But because of the work we put in on the back end, it makes marrying our barrels a little bit easier.
Awesome. I'm interested, like, so you guys like the stout and the cherry cast. You guys, it's just best flavor. Then you don't have a standard for like bottles. Like, okay, we go back to this to try to get it close to what that was in the past, kind of thing.
We do. We just also find that because we focus on good flavor, like if you taste old Westward versus now Westward, it can seem very stark, but it's a gradual process of, things get better and better. At this point, there is very much a signature taste profile to what Westward is. It can be a little bit more tricky when you're dealing with outside barrels like our stout cask or our Pinot Noir cask. But at this point, because of how much volume we're dealing with, we do strike that consistency.
So, let's see if I can do this. It's that single barrel stout that we have in Charlotte, that 121 proof. I tell you, this is one of the only ASMs that I've gone back to, and I just keep buying bottles over and over and over. I use that for this Northwest Old Fashioned. That is a unique, amazing drink. I mean, what a treat.
I'm glad you liked it.
Honestly, I've never added salt to an old fashioned before, and I feel like that kind of level loads all the flavors. It mellows everything out and adds a nice touch to it. For sure.
I was about to say the same thing. I've never heard of adding salt to an old fashioned before, but man, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
it does.
Everything out. There's nothing like
it gives a savory and sweet experience, right?
I don't really much like the sweet as much.
I almost want to add salt to my little spray when I do my brisket because I do a half bourbon, half apple cider. man, add salt to that and then spray.
It reminds me. So I originally came from the coffee industry, and I used to design menus for people. And one person really wanted to make an ingredient work, and I made a soy sauce latte. And that sounds awful. The key to that is you're just balancing flavors. So adding caramel, you're now dealing with kind of a umami salted caramel deal. So
Yeah, that saltiness. Yeah.
yes, having that saltiness with the honey and that kind of rich, kind of like vanilla caramel that you get from a new barrel whiskey, it just sings.
This honey tastes like it's a clove-based honey, almost.
It's not clove. So it's a carrot flower honey. So it is a wildflower honey
Okay.
from the Pacific Northwest here.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same as we have out here in the West Desert. It definitely has that more aromatics to it, which I think makes this very nice.
Yes.
Yeah, our honey out here out west is very, what would you say, sagey almost? It's really,
It is more sagey.
yeah.
The best way to get good honey in Utah, Anthony, just for everyone, is like if you could do a guy or do your own. There's a lot of people that do their own honey and the flowers around you. Oh my God, my neighbor does with the apple flowers that come up on the trees. Yeah. Oh my God, it's best. So good.
Hey, Jonathan, if I can ask you a question on the clubs, do you guys do any cast strength or single barrel offerings with them, or is it all the 90 proof? They're amazing. I mean, no doubt, but sometimes we like that kind of higher.
We are expanding it. One of the reasons that kind of kept us from doing something like that before was keeping the club a very consistent price. Because essentially we're each bottle, the way we run our club is that it doesn't cost anything to be in. You're just buying the bottles when they release. So we let people know, the charge date, and they can sub out if they want, and it's fine. But that being said, this upcoming year, 2024, we are releasing a cask strength release as well. So we're experimenting with trying out different proofs within our club as well. That being said, our Founders Club normally is dealing with different single barrel concepts. At this point, I think the Founders Club might be a little bit too big for just a single barrel. So it might be kind of like a 2-barrel project.
Nice. And then for us people out here in Utah that can't get it, do you guys offer a locker option where you can store it and then we can pick it up if we're that direction, or have somebody pick it up for us?
Yeah. We have an option that you just mark it as pickup. A lot of people come to that even locally just because we tend to throw parties for each one of them. So especially if people are traveling, that's kind of a really good reason to be around, because we tailor it to each release. So for say the wheat wine release, we go over to Breakside, buy everyone beers, do pairings with beers. So like Boilermakers. So we completely tailor them and they're free to club members. So a lot of people tend to do that. But that being said, if you select it as pickup, we'll hold on to it as long as you need.
Nice.
Anthony, there's another way too. Evanston, just get a P.O. box and then they can ship it.
Or what?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
Let's go.
Hey, Jonathan, do you guys have any plans to experiment with peat?
Yes. Local peat. Come on. They got local peat there too.
I was about
I
to ask
had
that
this one
question.
recently. I think it is a really cool concept, and I'm not going to say no. So one thing I will say is we have our. It'll be a number of years before we see it, but we did our first Alderwood smoked malt. That was really, really delicious as new make.
So you guys have a secret stash that you're saying?
Less secret stash as much as in progress stash. It's like I got to help establish a 30-barrel project we're working on. So at that point, our club is big enough that we're needing around 30 barrels for it to be supplying our club. And it's funny because I'm like, so excited about it. And then I'm like, all right, That means I got to stick around for another 7 years.
Any plans for native oak or Mizunara or any such?
Actually, no, we have done this. So here in the Pacific Northwest, we have what's called Garyana oak, or Gary, as a lot of us call it, which is our native American white oak. It is a protected species because it's non-renewable at this point. So basically, we can only harvest it once it's already fallen. And there's one cooperage out here. So we do currently have a few barrels of Garyana oak that we used within batches of what we call our Element series. So I think it was about a year and a half ago now, maybe, that we did an Elements release where about 10% was Garyana oak.
I didn't know that because I would have compared it with that Westland that they do all the time.
I think, Westland is also a similar number where it is really interesting because Garyana oak, we use it very sparingly because it is very intense. It is really cool to kind of get that sense of place in it, though. So I loved it. Not a lot of people love Garyana oak taste. It's very mineralic. To me, it tastes like petrichor, if you know what that is, which is very Pacific Northwest. It's the smell of rain on concrete.
Yeah, to me, when I didn't have your guys's, but with the Westland one, it gave that ocean spray, old wood dock, like the old captain smoking a pipe kind of feel to it.
100%.
Take your wheat wine. Sorry, go ahead. Finish. You're good.
I was just gonna say, it's just, I think you don't have to call it peat, but that oak pulls in so much of that moisture and stuff from the Pacific. You get that peat in it, I guess. I don't know.
Did you end up trying Westland's Solum release, the Pacific Northwest peat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you think about it?
It had a more richer than the Garyana, and it was. I thought that was like their number one for me.
I'm also with you. It was fascinating. Because instead of that like barbecue note that you get a lot from peat, it was more like this burnt, dry. Like you said, like you think old dock almost.
Well, like it was like the bonfire. Like you go to the beach and the bonfire kind of thing, and you get the ocean spray coming with it.
Yeah.
But it was stronger. Like it was just intense.
Yeah, I prefer the Garyana. I like both Garyana 5 and 6. Both are some of my favorites from Westland. I like the minerality and it has a little bit of herbal, so
give me a 2-week finish in an Amberana cask, no longer, but just a slight finish in an Amberana cask.
All right. Well, do you guys have any?
Yeah,
do you guys have any more questions before I?
Yeah, can you just so with the club, I've never been a part of a club, obviously, because we can't have it. Can you just give a breakdown on how often that works? Is it on just how the pricing breakdown and all that stuff works out for people that have never been involved in one?
Right. So we try and make it as flexible as possible. So it's as much commitment as you want to put into it, as long as you're staying up to date with it. So each of the bottles release at $100, and we are releasing quarterly. Wine clubs release, a monthly. Whiskey, arguably, you go through not as quick. So we wanted it to be a little bit more tamer at 4 bottles a year. So we're releasing them quarterly. That being said, like I said, being flexible wise, when you see the ship date, we announce what the whiskey is going to be. We announce when the charge date is and when it's shipping out. You can alter it by substituting a different bottle in. Like if you like the past release that's still available, maybe you could sub it in, or you just like our original. That price will completely adapt to what you adjust into it, including just skipping the release. So theoretically, like we keep it as easy as possible as long as people are staying.
The difference between the two clubs is you have the opportunity to buy 1 bottle or 3 bottles. Is that what I'm saying?
Yes. There's also usually 2 releases. So we have one exclusive to our Founders Club. So this upcoming release on the 18th, is that 3 days from now? We are doing the cognac finish for our entire club, and then put into the 3-bottle batch that the founders are getting. They also get a cider finish from 2 Pounds Bad Apple.
Put you on the spot. Is it too late to get in?
No.
That means I got to get a PO box real quick.
All right. Sign up tonight.
I just did sign up tonight, so we'll see in 3 days.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome.
No, Jonathan,
is there any more questions you guys have?
I just have a statement. I can't emphasize enough. I've tried so many ASMs. I've tried so many world whiskeys. Your product is just it's got this unique flavor. You guys know what you do. It is so wonderful. And I love everything. We're carrying it in North Carolina. Like I said, we get single barrels here, which are amazing. And we're getting them. And I just keep going back over and over again. And I literally, like 3 weeks ago, I was like, I'm dreaming. I need that chocolate bomb stout cask. I just needed it. And it's on the shelf. And it's a great opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. No, thank you. It's really cool being part of a company that at the end of the day, it's a job. So some people will have complaints, but it's the only place I've ever been where there isn't a single doubt in everyone's mind as far as the quality of what we're doing and believing in the product. Most of the people that work here because they think Westward's the best whiskey in the world. So yeah, I remember people being like, "Oh, you're a really good salesman," where it's like, you haven't seen me try to sell something that I don't genuinely think is the best. So I appreciate that. All right. I'll leave you with one last cheers. Thank you all for having me as a guest. And hopefully you all kind of took something away from it. All right.
Thank you so much.
Definitely did. Thank you.
Jonathan, it was nice having you.
It was great.
Thank you.
Great event. Thank you.
Thank you.